And I'm sure a lot of you noticed this, but there's an actual phone number for the Oceanic hotline on the news station that Frank was watching. And like most of you, I called it, and it was a pre-recorded message. It was pretty cool. No show I know does this type of thing, but it was just like if you know a family member that's on the flight, just leave your name. We'll contact you soon, something like that. But I was hearing funny rumors that this one, if you misdialed the number by one, I forgot which number it was. I won't give you the number because this gal get mad at me. But if you misdialed a number and you got this one guy, he was pretty mad because he was getting a lot of messages and a lot of calls. And the funny part and freaky part was that his name is really Jacob. So I thought that was pretty funny. When we get back to the present, it shows Frank, and he's pretty banged up. He's bleeding. He seems pretty worse off than most of the other people that fell to the island. And the funny thing is that we find out later that he landed the helicopter perfectly and it doesn't have a scratch on it. So not sure how he's so banged up. So he's climbing up to the top of the cliff, and I guess he wants some more cowbell because he sees a cow, and I think it used to belong to Mikhail when he set that little farm in his yard. And it's another thing that Locke blew up. And then he goes to pull out his phone, and it's cracked. It looked just like Hurley sat on it or something. And the funny thing is, if you remember, all the other people's phones work. I mean, Charlotte, she's crashed into the tree, fell into the water. It works just fine. Miles, again, face planted the rock. His worked fine. Naomi pierced the tree, and hers is fine. Yet Frank lands a helicopter just fine, and it somehow seems broken. Then after the phone doesn't work, if you notice, he gets an orange flare gun and shoots a flare in the air. Yet if you remember, Naomi had a black one that she shot. So I don't know if they're color coding things when they're dropping down or what, but they are different. So we get back from the commercial, and it's actually Naomi's back burner. And she's in a big, huge room, just one table in the middle with good old Matthew Abaddon from the guy that we met last episode of season 4. And we found out that Abaddon means place of destruction in Hebrew, which I thought was pretty interesting, meaning that he's probably not going to be helping the Losties in any way. But he's there with Naomi, and he's obviously the one behind getting the 5 of them together to go to the island. And if you remember from last episode, he said, "Are they alive?" He could be referring to the other, in Hurley's flash forward, he could be referring to the actual Losties that crashed there in 815, or he could be referring to the 5 people that he sent. Maybe he doesn't know if they're alive or not. He probably hasn't heard back from them yet. And then Naomi says, "But what if there are survivors?" And he firmly says, "No, there were no survivors." And she says, "Yeah, but what if?" And he's like, "No, there were no survivors." And to me, that was almost as if they have to say it, like they both know that there are survivors, but they're saying that firmly, like that's what they're supposed to say, and they don't want anyone else hearing that there are survivors. Saeed is the man. Back to the present, he is the one that figures out how the helicopter, that it will work. He pretty much knows everything about everything. So then you see Kate and Dan carrying Naomi over, and it's freaky. I don't know why they don't close her eyes earlier. Like when Miles is examining her earlier, I don't know why they don't close her eyes. It's creeping me out. But they carried her over, and Frank says, "Oh, we can't have any extra weight. They won't support it." Yet Hurley somehow manages to get on. And then Miles calls on his phone, back to the boat, I assume, and he gets a girl named Regina who seems kind of out of place, and Miles asks, "Oh, can I speak to Mikowski?" I think that's his name. And I figure that's George. The first time he called, the guy named George, so I figured it's George Mikowski. And Regina says, "Oh, sorry, he's not available to talk." And Miles says, "Oh, it's important, just get him." And she's like, "Sorry, I have to go." And I'm going to talk to you a little bit later, just in a couple minutes, about Ben and how he says he has a man on the boat. So I figure that the reason why she's not getting him, it's probably because they're being held at gunpoint or something, or they're being hostages, and she has to say it. I think we'll find that out next episode. And Frank is flirting with Juliet and asks her name, and she says Juliet, and she's like, "Oh, Juliet, huh? What's your last name?" And she says Burke. He said, "Oh, you weren't on the plane," and she gets a little startled and yells over to Miles and says, "Oh, she's a native," and he says that he memorized the list, so obviously he knew that there were survivors before. So I think it seems like he and Miles were the only ones. The guys were the ones that knew, except for Dan, were the ones that knew there were people there. Whereas Naomi and Charlotte seemed like they didn't know anyone else was there. At least that's what they're saying. So, anyways, before this, Jack was kept asking Miles towards the end why they were there. And after this whole thing with Juliet, he comes running over to her and holds out a picture of Ben. And he goes, "You want to know why we're here? This is why." And he shows a picture of Ben. Now, this picture is interesting. I'm going to keep it up here for a while. A few things. The clothes are a little weird and outdated. He looks to me, I don't know about you guys, what you think about him, but he looks like he's going through some airport or something. It looks like he's not on the island though, and yet he says he's lived there his whole life. We know Ben to be a huge liar, so. And also, look, one of the weird parts is look at the computer monitor in the background, and look how it's not plugged into anything. I'm not sure what that's all about. It's kind of weird. Some people think that Ben's leading someone behind him. Some people think it's Michael, but I don't know. To me, I don't think so. And also, you kind of wonder how they got that picture. If Ben's been on the island the whole time, no one can leave. I wonder how they got it. Maybe I don't think he would send it to anyone. Then we get back over to Locke's group, and they're talking to Charlotte, and she's getting a little uncomfortable, starts standing up, and she gets shot actually by Ben, who steals her gun. You don't see it. You see him looking at the gun a little bit earlier. I'm not sure how he got it, but he shoots her, and she's wearing a bulletproof vest, so she's fine. But Sawyer definitely wants to lay down the punches on him, and I think he actually likes to be punched because he finds himself in a lot of situations to be punched. Comes to run over to help her, and he makes a comment. He says, "How good would you be to me dead?" Yet Locke has no trouble killing Naomi. Locke goes over to Sawyer and says, "I'll finish this. This is my mess." And Ben says, "I have the answers you need. Basically, anything you want to know, I'll tell you." And it's funny. I did not expect this at all. He asked, "What's the black smoke?" I was actually happy that they didn't answer it because I like finding out things by accident, how they accidentally tell you or they find out yourself, and that's one of the biggest things I want to know about. So I want to save that towards the end. And the thing is, he says he doesn't know, and we're like, oh, okay, whatever. But actually, it tells you a lot. Ben sincerely said he doesn't know. If you remember Juliet, she didn't know what it was either when she was handcuffed with Kate running through that fence. So I don't think the others know what it is. And Locke obviously doesn't know what it is. You would think that most people would say, "Oh, where'd you take all our friends, and where'd you put all the children?" But no, Locke has to go asking these kind of questions. And then when Locke starts going away, he says, "Her name is Charlotte." And at first, I thought he was referring to the black smoke, like her name is Charlotte. And I'm like, what? But he's talking about the actual girl, Charlotte, and he knew everything about her. Details that he has a pretty sharp mind, and he could remember all that. And he knew the details about everyone else on the flight. And then he says at the end that they're here for him. And he says, and Locke asks why, and he says, because they got a man on their boat. And as earlier I'd tell you who I think it is. I think it's Michael. We know he's going to be coming back this season. I think it'd be a good time for him to come. I don't know what other person he has, as most of them got blown up by Sawyer and Bernard, not by Jin. So that's the end of the recap. I think what's happening is that the Losties are shifting more into like an others position, whereas the new 4 people that are on the island are kind of like the old Losties. It's funny because as I mentioned earlier, the conversations between Jack and Miles was the same as like Jack and Tom, and then also the scene with Charlotte when she falls in the waters and swimming around. It reminded me of that one scene with Jin and Sawyer and Michael when they're on the beach and they see the others, which they think they are, but it turns out to be Ana Lucia's group. It reminded me of that scene when she sees Locke. And then also it's like a hostage situation type thing. She's being held like in a prisoner basically. And then also Locke is basically like the Ben. He's the leader who takes orders from a ghost, which is Walt, and Jacob is the Ben.